My name is Janet Hunt, and I'm your chair for this evening's David Hunter Memorial Lecture. Could someone just nod and let me know that they can hear me? Or send me a message? I'm getting some messages that I can't be heard. Okay, good. So tonight we have people joining us from around Australia. So on behalf of Anti-ACT, I would like to welcome you all very much to this lecture tonight. So the lecture is organised by Anti-ACT, but with great support from Anti-National, and probably many of us on the lecture tonight are on Ngunnawal land here in Canberra, Ngunnawal Ngambri land. But we appreciate that there are people on the call from many other lands of First Nations people. And I would also like to pay my respects to all of those countries, all of those First Nations people, and as well to all First Nations people who are joining us here tonight. Can I just, before introducing Selena, ask everybody to keep your microphones muted during the lectures, otherwise it's a little distracting for the speakers. And if you have questions, could you please put them into the chat box, and Kirsten will ask them for us towards the end of the lecture. So in every previous lecture, Auntie Agnes Shea has welcomed us to country. But with the move to an online presentation, she's asked this year for her granddaughter, Sonia Walker, to welcome us here tonight. So thank you very much, Selena. I'd very much like to invite you to welcome us to country.
Thanks, Janet. Hi, everyone. Yuma. Galaganya Jelena Walker, Darawa Nona Darawa Nonawo. Hello, my name is Selena Walker, and this is Ngunnawal country. I want to start by acknowledging my elders, my grandmother, Auntie Agnes Shea, and pay respects to elders past, present, and future. I want to start by acknowledging any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that have joined us this evening. Welcome my brothers, sisters, aunts, and uncles. I'd like to extend that to all our non-Indigenous friends that have joined us. Welcome. As Janet said, majority of us are on Ngunnawal country, but I want to acknowledge and pay my respects to countries from which you're sitting on, and pay respects to all elders, no matter what country they're from. The Ngunnawal community are the traditional custodians of Canberra and the region. You may not be aware that the Ngunnawal Nation is made up of several family groups and not just individuals who represent this country. Therefore, as a community, we have an elected body known as the United Ngunnawal Elders Council to represent us, along with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elected body of the ACT. This is important for you to understand and acknowledge, for our identity is a collective identity. There are other Indigenous people from around the nation, the country, and the world who've come to visit on Ngunnawal country. I would like to acknowledge and welcome you all. The tradition of welcoming the people to country is a practice that was handed down by our ancestors, old people, and elders from the beginning of time. Before entering another person's country, you would first announce your arrival and not enter until a traditional owner formally welcomed you. The reason for this practice was to protect your spirit whilst in another person's country, and also to show respect for the country which you're entering. It's wonderful to see that this practice is now recognised and respected. I guess it's like not entering into someone's home unless you're first invited. The Ngunnawal people, as within all Aboriginal people, have a great heritage that we'd like to share with all Australians from every walk of life. As you are aware, Canberra means meeting place, and Canberra has been a place of gathering for many Aboriginal tribes of Australia to come together to deal with important business and also for ceremonial purposes. Our Ngunnawal ancestors believe in the importance of people gathering to build relationships, share knowledge, and to celebrate the gift of heritage and history. We believe it's important for all to recognise our unique history and to gain an understanding that our land is our heritage and how loss of land has disconnected so many Aboriginal people from their spiritual links, cultural identity, and connections. So on behalf of my grandmother, thank you once again. It's wonderful to see that this happens every year. COVID or not, we still go ahead. We shall soldier on. Unfortunately, can't stay for the rest of the event. It is feeding time at the zoo, so I have to go and feed my little tribe, but well done. Thank you once again. I feel honoured to have done this, and love to hear the feedback. So well done, and I'll finish now in the words of my people, the Ngunnawal people. Yumalandi Yananga Yarawu Yangu, which means you may leave footprints on our land now, or in other words, welcome to country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Selena, and that was a very generous welcome to country. And thanks for all that you do here in the ACT on behalf of your people to care for this country, and I know you do. And would you please pass our best wishes to your grandma from all of us here. Thank you. Sorry she couldn't be with us tonight. Yeah. Okay, bye. Bye, Selena. Yep. So this is the 18th David Hunter Memorial Lecture, and for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I wanted to just let you know a little bit about the lecture. So it honours the memory of David Hunter, and David was one of the founding members of Anti-ACT, and he was an enormously supportive and inspiring activist on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander issues. In October 2000, he was sadly diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and he died in December 2003. And since then, we've hosted an annual memorial lecture in his memory because of his contribution to reconciliation and Indigenous rights. I'd like to acknowledge David's family, who I think are online here with us tonight. His parents, Doug and Jan Hunter in Albury, his wife, Jeanette, who's actually a very active member of Anti-ACT, his brother, James, in Melbourne, sister Kate in New Zealand, and Jeanette and David's 3 children, Daniel in Melbourne, Benjamin in Sydney, and Joshua in Canberra. We're very pleased that you're able to join us tonight in this online version for the second year, sadly, of the David Hunter Memorial Lecture. We also have online a number of MLAs from the ACT Legislative Assembly, and I'd really like to welcome them and thank them for attending at this very busy time for them. I think we all need to appreciate the work our leaders are doing to try and keep us safe through this COVID time. Bhiamie is with us. Sadly, Dean has not been able to attend tonight, but I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment after we've heard from Bhiamie. So we're going to ask Bhiamie to make his presentation, and then after he's presented, and he has pre-recorded his presentation because he's up in Goodooga and we weren't too confident about whether the internet line would hold up. So we're going to ask Michael to run the pre-recorded lecture, and then afterwards Bhiamie will be able to interact with us and answer your questions and comments.
Yama. My name is Bhiamie Williamson, and it is my immense privilege to be delivering this year's David Hunter Memorial Lecture. I wish to acknowledge firstly the various countries that people are joining from, noting that this is an online, a virtual event, but also a national event now. But in particular, I'd like to pay my respects and acknowledge Ngunnawal people and the lands of the Ngunnawal people, an area now known as Canberra or the ACT, where this event was originally planned to take place and where I feel many people would be joining from. So I myself am joining from my Ngurumba, from my little home camp, my home community, up in northwest New South Wales, a little place called Goodooga. So this is Euahlayi country, and this is my grandmother's country. So one of the unintended consequences of COVID is that people, can work remotely. Some people in some places can work remotely. I'm lucky enough to be one of them, and have a very blessed arrangement where I can live and raise my young family up here on country while still working at the Centre for Aboriginal Economic Policy Research at the Australian National University. I'd also like to acknowledge my mother, who comes from Cloncurry, and her mother, who comes from Normanton up into the Gulf of Carpentaria up in northwest Queensland. So yeah, it's my absolute privilege of delivering this year's David Hunter Memorial Lecture on the theme of Heal Country. And I'd like to thank ANTAR, ACT, and in particular, my colleague and friend, Dr. Janet Hunt, for inviting me to deliver this lecture and for coordinating and promoting this event. I really hope it is worth your while tuning in and having a listen. So I've been invited to reflect on the theme of Heal Country, which is this year's NAIDOC theme. And to do this, I want to explore what Heal Country looks like, both quite conceptually, but also practically. So I'm going to explore the idea of Heal Country or Healing Country through 3 different places and spaces. But before I do, I think it's important to first reflect on the discourse of country and how we think about it, how we conceptualise it. So to engage with the theme of Heal Country, we need to have a shared understanding of what country actually means, or at least towards a closer understanding of what country actually means. For Indigenous peoples, the land, the water, the sky, they all possess life, full of life. They possess memory, feelings, and a will of their own. We Indigenous peoples don't indicate our engagements with the land, with the water, with the sky, as many others do, with terms like, spending a day in the country or going up country. For us, country is far more deep, it's far more complex, and I'd say it's much more wholesome. But not all country is the same. Different people belong and have relationships and responsibilities with different parts of the country, with their own country. These are places and spaces that they are responsible for. People share intimate and relational existences with various places within the landscape itself, things like mountain ranges, river systems, marine systems, sky country, wetlands, forests, deserts, and so much more. This is why common terms that you hear, such as saltwater people, freshwater people, desert people, these terms matter. It speaks to this ultimate and underlying idea of being a person from a particular place, and that is the cornerstone of one's identity. But truly understanding country requires moving the discourse beyond the conceptual understanding and towards a pragmatic and political understanding of what country means and how it's governed. Perhaps attempting to understand what is country is perhaps not the best framing. Maybe we can reframe it and ask ourselves, what can country do? Country can be happy. Country can be sad. Country can be angry. Country can be violent. And country can be sick. It can be all of these things and more, and it can be multiple of them at the same time. But to highlight this point, I wish to reflect on 3 different parts of this vast landscape we now know as Australia. And I invite you to look, to listen, and to feel the different parts of this country. So bear with me while I share my screen here. So the first place that I invite you to reflect on and to go on a journey with me on is up here. So this is the McArthur River Mine, just north of the township of Borroloola, up in the Northern Territory. I spent a lot of time up in Borroloola during my research and studies. So I worked with the 2 ranger groups up there, the Liantha-Woodiyatta Sea Rangers, which is representative of Yunyara and Marta people, and they operate primarily over the sea country areas around the mouth of the McArthur River, and also over the Yunyara country, which is now known as the Sir Edward Pilu group of islands. So this is a very early start from Borroloola, getting out onto the country to go out and do some work out on the islands. It's a spectacular, spectacular country. And just an unreal part of the world. It's a real treasure, a hidden treasure in this wonderful place that we all have, that we all share. So this is one day, one morning going out, but it's not just the sun rises, the sun sets, you know, the rivers and whatnot that are spectacular. The country is just full of life. So this is a photo just outside of coming into Barwon that I took. This beautiful big wedge-tailed eagle just sitting perched on this branch. I was lucky enough that it was feeling quite photogenic, and let me take a few snaps of this one. So this is someone who we call Mullion, and it's actually my youngest brother's namesake. Yeah, so going through the country, you see these iconic species, iconic animals in the land. Like I said, it's just living and breathing these stories and these wonderful beings. But as you go through the country as well, there are some things that just don't belong, some things that just leap from the pages and make you angry, upset and sad. One of those places is the McArthur River mine, a mine that's been in the news a lot, but generally not for the right reasons, as having a really, really detrimental impact on the McArthur River in particular, and the poisoning and the leaching of chemicals into the river system and poisoning a lot of the marine and aquatic species. Things like detecting lead in fish that people eat and things like that. So, and the McArthur River mine itself was built over a really sacred area for the Aboriginal groups from that area. So yeah, this is, it just kind of jumps out, and it really caught national attention a few years ago when one of its waste rock piles spontaneously combusted and spewed toxic gases into the atmosphere, which is pretty out there. But it's not just the mine. The mine gets a lot of attention, but just up from the mine, there's a port that they built to export all the minerals from the mine. It's called Bing Bong, and it's a real, I guess, strategic asset is the common way of understanding the port. So the port's utilised by other mines around the area. In particular, there's an iron ore mine north of Borroloola, right, going up into Arnhem Land. So there's an iron ore mine up there, and they built a highway, a big track coming from the mine down to Bing Bong Port. About a year after, they opened that highway, that transport route. I went up there, and this was the tunnel of the highway. It was just coated in all of this red dust, this red ash. So in transporting the iron ore from the mine down to the port, none of the trucks were covered, so it wasn't necessary for them to secure their loads. And the result was, when they're going, 120 kilometres down these highways, the red dust from the iron ore, and the iron ore itself just kind of blows off the top and spills everywhere along this channel, along this corridor. And all of the trees along there were coated in this red ash. It was kind of like a moonscape, really. It looked like something from Mars. It had that deep Martian colour, and the country was just choking under it. It's really confronting. These are meant to be green trees. So this is actually going into a mangrove area. So it's meant to be one of the really deep, lush green, and instead it's just Martian red. And it's not just the plants, though, that the dust settles on. So this is a photo. Sorry for it being a bit hazy. I think I took it in the car, kind of on the go. So these are cockatoos. You can see the one on the right. It's red. So, an iconic Australian species was literally being transformed because of the impacts of transporting iron ore. The thing that's the staple of the Australian economy, and it's really choking and destroying and transforming our own iconic species. So, it's pretty confronting when you go through and you're with Aboriginal groups, particularly the Rangers groups, the Aboriginal Yatta and the Wanyagawa Rangers, people who conserve the country, who protect culture, and who are just really good at what they do, and really strong cultural people. And you go through and you learn the stories, and you see the country and the vibrant country, really. And then you see this kind of stuff. It's just so, like I said, out of place, and really, really confronting. So this is one area. The next instance is one that I'm sure no one will surprise no one, and that is the bushfires of 2018 and 2019. Remembering that the bushfires, the phenomenon now popularly known as Black Summer, actually started in the winter in 2019. The end of winter, the first fires ignited up in central Queensland, and then what ensued was obviously a spread of fires unlike anything the world had ever seen. So this is photos taken. These are photos taken around October on the mid-north coast of New South Wales when it was roaring through. The north coast and mid-north coast areas, from right up towards Tweed Heads and right through the hinterland, like the Sunshine Coast hinterland, and in those mountain areas, right down to sort of Port Macquarie, and even coming down further to just north of Newcastle. So all these fires were just taking off and ripping off, and this is just such an incredible photo, frightening photo is what I'd call it, of the massive fire front sweeping through what is a pretty iconic area, iconic kind of landscape of the Australian continent, something we all know, very familiar with, and are endeared to. And the fire just roaring through it. A couple of days after the fire, a local photographer got out and was taking these photos. And it's obviously a photo of some of the forested areas along the coastline where the fire just went through and just obliterated everything. It's really sad that these photos like this are very familiar to us now. And another one here of the kind of a larger landscape, taking a photo from a highway. And I don't know, it just looks like a nuclear bomb has just gone off. And we're all really familiar, particularly people from Canberra and the south coast of New South Wales, seeing that place just, it's like another planet, really, after those fires went through. There was nothing familiar about it. And it was just so, I don't know, like, it just, we're let down by language to describe what the country went through, what the country as a whole, Australia as a whole, but also the country itself went through. And it's still obviously on a very long journey of healing and repair. We've got the bushfires, and I think that the theme of Heal Country really came about in direct response to the bushfires, and I applaud the NAIDOC committee for pursuing that. But it's not just the bushfires. So up here, we'll see, bringing us now up here to my country, up in northwest New South Wales, up in the Northern Basin. So this is a photo of the Barwon River just east of Brewarrina. So this is just behind the old Brewarrina mission. Brewarrina mission was a really big mission up here where a lot of Aboriginal people were brought to when they cleared the land in the early 1900s. And this is a place that my nan got taken to when she was 3 years old, and she grew up here at the mission. But just behind the mission, ducked behind, is the Barwon River here. And it's just the most beautiful, peaceful, serene places that I retreat to often. And the Barwon River along Brewarrina and up to Walgett, where my family's from, places that we always came as kids, always came. For me personally, being brought back ever since I was a baby. When I was a baby, I came back and my father took me for a swim in the Barwon River. And so it's always been with me. I've always been a part of it, and I've always known it and been really familiar and been at home with it. The rivers are a lifeblood, the lifeblood of the land. Up here, there is no land without the water. So because it just like had such a strong attachment to this place in particular, and this stretch of the river, I love eating the fish on it. I love swimming and getting the mussels. I love listening to the birds. I love camping. I love swinging in from the trees into the water and playing around. It's a place full of memory, both deep time memory, but also personal, familial memories. Happy times, kids growing up laughing in the river and on the banks of the river. Such was its importance to me, that I knew, and I always longed throughout all my life when I knew I wanted to be a father, that I could not wait until the moment that I became a father and I could bring my kids back here to the river to enjoy the country in exactly the same way as I did, as my father did, as his mother did, as her mother did, as her mother did, right back forever. Something that I really looked forward to, I longed for. And then my wife and I had our first son in 2018. And I feel like, you know, maybe some people listening to this lecture have just heard that date of 2018 and shuddered, because yes, it was the peak of the drought, and obviously the peak of the, you know, well, I'd say the peak of the corruption and mismanagement of the Murray-Darling more generally. And so the first time I ever brought my baby son home, this is what that same river looked like. So this is the Barwon River, a bit further up, just outside of Walgett. This place here is a place that I came as a kid and I swam in. And I came back here with my little boy, and it was just, I don't know what to say still. This is what corruption and greed looks like. This is what it does to the land. This, it was just so personally devastating for me to come home with my little fella in a key moment of my life, and of his life as well, and be met with this. And then as we walked through the freshwater mussels that I said we love kind of going and feeling with your toes and getting them out, the riverbed was just full, or what was, you know, was the riverbed was just full of all these poor mussels. So these are kind of the foundation species really of the river systems. Everything builds from these mussels. And when you walk along though, the shells of these dead mussels are just dried up, shriveled up, and just were cracked everywhere. It was just so sad, you know. And I just walked along, and my wife took these photos of us, and I thank her for doing that. And but yeah, so this is me and my little guy. He would have been about 5 months old then, and I just sat down there in the river with my little guy, and I just cried, and I just felt so angry that me and my little fellow were just completely robbed of this moment. And I just felt just the deepest sadness for our land and for the river itself. It's just, words can't describe it. All right, I'm going to stop the share and come back. So the purpose of what I think is the purpose of this year's theme, Heal Country, is it forces us to see all of these things, not in isolation, but as one phenomenon, whether it be mines or ports outside of Borroloola, whether it be the bushfires in the coastal areas of New South Wales and Victoria and up into Queensland and South Australia, or it be water mismanagement and corruption and greed and climate change driven drought in the middle of our most important river system. All these things are the same. They are fundamentally the same issue. They can all be traced back to the same issue. And that is the point of Heal Country. That is the point that we need to get across. No matter where we are and the environmental catastrophes that we've been facing, whether they be man-made or natural, although those lines are increasingly hard to delineate, there is a real problem in this country, and there is a real problem in this world, and it's something that we really need to address. All of these photos and stories have come from the last 5 years. No matter where we are as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, we find ourselves in this, the fight of our lives. Heal Country forces us to see all of this stuff together and put it together and understand it, as I said, as one phenomenon and as one problem that we need to address. I particularly want to acknowledge Torres Strait Islander people who are at the forefront of climate change and whose very existence as island people is under threat due to rising sea levels. You know, we risk, even in the next 20 years, seeing Indigenous peoples, Torres Strait Islanders, becoming refugees in their own land, and that is just not acceptable, and we need to focus a lot of our efforts and advocate hard for Torres Strait Islanders. But Hill Country invites non-Indigenous Australians to engage with the land through our eyes. It gets people to ask themselves that if you find solace in the natural values of this place, you know, our beaches, our forests, our rivers, mountains, oceans, deserts, and more, and all the life that exists in these places, the birds, the trees, the fish, you know, the oysters. If you treasure these things, if you hold these things dear, there's no bench in this fight. You need to step up and you need to get into the fight with us. And I think this is the real legacy of David Hunter as well, being really strong advocate. And being an advocate is not part-time. You know, it's something you do, it's something you wear that you can't take off. It becomes a part of who you are. And the legacy of David Hunter tells us that, a really strong, passionate non-Indigenous advocate for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and for, you know, and for a greater consciousness of humanity and environmental protection. So I think it's a really fitting that that this lecture is being given to memorialise him in this year's theme. So to finish it off, I actually want to end with lyrics from one of my favourite Archie Roach songs. I'm sure everyone here loves listening to Archie Roach. I listen to a lot of Archie Roach. And one of my favourite songs of his was Heal the People. And the lyrics of Heal the People tell this story in a way that that very few others could. So I'm going to finish this lecture by reading some lyrics from the Archie Roach song, Heal the People, and I just invite you to listen and to be transformed and journeyed with Archie, and it's a true gift of Archie because we can all journey with him. Don't let the beautiful die. Don't let the innocent cry. Don't let it die. Don't let it cry. Don't let the beautiful die. Heal the people, heal the land. Then we better understand it goes hand in hand. Heal the people, heal the land. I thank you for listening, and I look forward to responding to some questions shortly in our Q&A. Yeah, thanks everyone. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Bhiamie. That was a very powerful, compelling, moving presentation, I think, on the theme. I think we all really appreciate how personal that issue is for you. And I think we all feel a sense of sorrow, I guess, that this country has been eroded, degraded, treated in the way it has so badly, and that this has huge impacts on all of us, but most especially on the First Nations whose country it is. And I just want to thank you very much for such a powerful presentation. And I hope that everyone online today, as well as many others who are not, will be able to join with you and with other First Nations people around the country to try and reverse this and genuinely heal the country in the best ways we possibly can. So thank you very much. I was a bit remiss. You did a great introduction of yourself, but I failed at the beginning to say that Bhiamie is a great staff member at the Centre for Aboriginal Economic Policy Research, and he has a master's from Canada, from the University of Victoria in British Columbia, and he's now, as well as being a staff member at CAPA, doing his PhD, and I think some of what we saw relates to his PhD as well. So he speaks with great authority. He's also, I believe, on the ACT Bushfire Council, and he has been very active with recently with a number of pieces, written pieces about the way First Nations people are being excluded from decision making in these areas, all these crisis areas, from bushfires, river issues, and indeed COVID response. So look out for some of Bhiamie's great writings that he's got out there. Just Google him and you'll find them. So I think we'll now, I'll just explain about Dean. And I'm very sad that Dean hasn't been able to join us, and then we'll have some questions for Bhiamie. So Dean was going to join us. He's a Wiradjuri man, and he works with the ACT Parks and Conservation Service as an Aboriginal Fire Management Officer. And he was awarded ACT NAIDOC Caring for Country Award in 2015 for all the work he's done over many years in land management in the ACT. But he's had some family issues today, and he had to pull out tonight. So he sent his apologies to everybody, and he has indicated that he's happy to talk to people. So if anybody would like to be in touch with him particularly, please contact Anti-ACT through our website or our Facebook page, and we will put you in touch with Dean. So I'm now going to open it up for questions to Bhiamie, and we're going to hope that the internet from Gaduga holds up so that he can answer your questions and comments that you might like to make. So Kirsten is going to convey them. So Kirsten, I'm handing over to you to let us have some of the questions that you're seeing in the chat. And please keep putting your questions in the chat, everybody. We look forward to many questions for Bhiamie.
Great. Thank you, Bhiamie. That was a great presentation, and we can kick off here with the first question that was put around about the time when you were talking about that very devastating site at the Barwon River. And it's from Louise, and she is asking whether that is from extraction or excess extraction or agriculture, for agriculture, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the question. Yes, it's from over extraction. And it's, you know, I feel like we're kind of, you know, on a hamster wheel here, because we've had a couple of good years of rain. Obviously 2018 was the peak of that crisis. And it you know, it's, when I say these crises are connected, they really are, you know, that the 2018, the devastation of the bushfires as well. So they are isolated incidents, but it's all the same thing. It is from not just over extraction at that point in time, but a system of over extraction that continues to do so and continues to do so now. Like I said, we've had a couple of good years of rain, and the you know, the permits in the system, the amount of water they give out is already, they over allocate all the water in the Murray-Darling, especially in the Northern Basin up here, and you see sort of some political parties still fighting for the right to you know, harvest Senate as we speak. Like it's that's going on. So it's kind of like, what do we learn? We go through these crises and there's kind of seems to be very little to no learning from it. So yes, it's from over extraction. Yes, it's from drought, which is driven by climate change. So it's all of these things come together and it just creates a perfect, you know, recipe for disaster.
Thank you. Then we can go on to the next question here from Rita. I think most people can see the question. So the question is, can you please comment on Indigenous knowledges as intangible cultural heritage and its importance for mitigating national disasters?
Yeah, sure. So intangible cultural heritage. So I'm not a cultural heritage expert. I'm not an IP expert or Indigenous cultural intellectual property. There are people who are experts in that. But insofar as I understand it, certainly in the fields that I work in, especially environmental management, intangible cultural heritage really talks to the systems of like Indigenous knowledges of how to manage the land. And I don't know why they're called intangible, by the way. It's just cultural heritage. It's Indigenous people's own knowledge. Like it's just this like land, water, tangible, intangible. It's like it's all the same thing. So like knowledge systems, so something I'm really familiar with is cultural burning. So things like the knowledge of burning the landscape, when to burn it, how to burn it, in what conditions, for what reasons, who does it, what, you know, the whole thing. So all of that is what you would call intangible cultural heritage. And when you think about sort of the explosion in interest in cultural burning post bushfires, yeah, you can kind of, it's climate change is creating a strategic opportunity for Indigenous peoples and the resurgence of our knowledges and the value, like, and non-Indigenous people placing an enormous value on our knowledge systems to address something that, you know, that they obviously, you know, governments don't have answers for. And so it's great to see Indigenous peoples create an opportunity being created for Indigenous people that previously wasn't there. It's also rife, and there's a lot of risks involved with, yeah, the extraction, I think, of knowledges and of people's cultural and intellectual properties, especially where they're not being provided. It's not being met substantially with, you know, greater powers of self-determination and greater kind of political empowerment as well.
Thank you. So here's a big one. How can non-Indigenous, from anonymous attendee, how can non-Indigenous people actively contribute to advocating for Indigenous natural land management?
Yeah, this is a question that gets asked often.
I should say, or where do you think we can start? Sorry.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Thanks, Kirsten. So I get asked this question, or different derivatives of this same question, of like, how can non-Indigenous people help, support? It's to kind of explore that question a little bit more. I find it, whilst I understand where the question is coming from, I genuinely don't understand why non-Indigenous people feel powerless in this, in this current climate, or this current nation state. Like, non-Indigenous people have the power. Like, you have the power. We don't. You do. So it's like, help in any way you can. As I said in the lecture, like, being an advocate for change, it's not a part-time gig. You know, whether you're at work, whether you're at your social clubs, in your family circles, you know, create those opportunities. Look for those opportunities. You know, we're like our filter. Well, we can't turn. We've got no opportunity. We can't turn off caring. We can't turn off, you know, turning a blind eye. So, yes, we want support. Yes, we'd love for people to walk with us, to work with us. And I really think it starts at the local level, those local relationships, those local community-based projects, those local kind of working groups, local land care groups. Like, that's the local level is really what I think is the most substantial and the most meaningful. So I'd really encourage you to, obviously you're here and you care and you're really kind of involved in community activities. So keep doing that, extend it, and every opportunity that comes up,
sorry, Bhiamie, your screen is just frozen on me.
For Indigenous cultural intellectual property, whatever, like the floodplain harvesting inquiry, internet, yeah, like it's just a bit slow. It does work, it's just a bit slow. But yeah, get involved however you can. You know, we make submissions everywhere. We write to MPs all the time. It'd be great if you joined us in doing those simple things as well.
Thank you. I've got one from Rebecca, but I'm going to skip over that and come back to it in a minute, and give you this one from Louise. No, sorry, oops, skipped to the wrong one. From Piroska. We heard a lot about wanting to learn and use traditional fire burning techniques at the end of 2019-20 fires. Is there anything actually happening to bring this to fruition?
It depends. It really depends where you are. So one of the big results of the Royal Commission was we've seen this pushing of land management, this pushing in particular of cultural land management, Aboriginal people's cultural burning, pushing it from the Commonwealth into the states and territories. And what we see from that when we see states and territories leading cultural land management and cultural burning programs is you get really uneven results. And so focusing on southern areas of Australia, I think Victoria is really streaking ahead with this stuff. They've got developed a cultural burning, traditional owner kind of cultural burning strategy, statewide strategy. But that statewide strategy is also built on a consistent policy of self-determination and resolving issues of traditional ownership in Victoria that have now been kind of long-standing. So they can do that. In New South Wales, for instance, you know, they're still figuring it out. So there's a want and a thirst to support cultural burning in particular, but in a place as complicated and convoluted as and conservative as New South Wales, it's really difficult. So South Australia, again, is really difficult. WA, it depends if you're in north or southern parts or the middle of WA. So I'd say there are uneven responses, and some groups are excelling, some groups are doing okay, some groups are continuing to be frustrated. So yeah, it really depends where you are.
Thank you, Bhiamie. So I'm going to segue to a different topic now with Rebecca's question. Thanks kindly, Bhiamie, powerful and moving presentation. Totally agree with your comments around the connectivity between these crises. Would you make the link between the health of the environment and our people, especially in regards to social and emotional well-being, mental health, and suicide, with the widening gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous across a range of health indicators? Big one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a big one. Yes, is the short answer. You know, when we have healthy, functioning, vibrant ecosystems and environments, it's enjoyable. It adds so much to our lives. You know, of course, it's intrinsically connected to our mental health and our social and emotional well-being. But I also think that the way, this is something I've increasingly come up with in the social and emotional well-being space, I guess, in the mental health space. You know, there are very few, I guess, Indigenous informed notions of, you know, I guess, social and emotional well-being. Very little Indigenous informed notions of mental health and what that means. So there's a little bit. Indigenous healing discourse is a really large discourse, a really large field, both a kind of a academic field, but also a practice-based field. There's Indigenous, social emotional well-being, cultural determinants of health, social determinants of health, there's quite a lot of these different fields that all talk to the same issue. But I think at the heart of all of them is really this questioning and problematizing of what is health? You know, what does it mean to be healthy? Is being healthy simply not being sick? You know, and I think sort of the Western kind of clinical diagnostic model of health is so limiting, in that if you're physically don't have any symptoms of ill health, well, then you're considered healthy. And that just doesn't sit with, that just isn't consistent with Indigenous ways of being, with Indigenous worldviews, with how we understand who we are in these places. And so engaging with Indigenous peoples isn't just good for the environment, it's actually good for your spirit as well, in the way that you understand what health is and good health. You know, and I think this is a really salient discussion given the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So yes, it matters. And if something is mental health, I don't know why that should be spoken about any different to your overall health.
Thank you. Russell had a similar question along those lines. I think you've addressed that very nicely. We have another one from Charisse. Hi, Bhiamie. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for drawing the interconnected threads together of country, people, history and action to show the pulse of life that runs through them all. And reminding us, I should put more of a comment really, and reminding us that advocacy is a way of life. A lot of healing needs to be done. Sorry, that wasn't the actual question. That was reading out a comment there. There's a lot of comments, can I say, coming through to thank you for your presentation. There's some answers online. Would you like me to read them out at the moment? I've got a couple on cultural burning. People have made a contribution.
Yeah, sure.
Judith has said, I've been trying to support a cultural burn here in the ACT and seems to have hit a brick wall. I've gone through the local custodians. So that was one comment. Another one is from Helen. Landcare Warwick, Queensland have been conducting cultural burning workshops in the Warwick Stanthorpe area over this year to assist with fire management. There are a couple of comments there on the cultural burning stuff. Did you want to make a comment about the ACT situation at all?
Sorry, just broke out like the cultural burning in the ACT, is that right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Liz has been trying to, and she thinks there's a brick wall.
Yeah. So I've been, I live in Yuruga now, but we moved up here a year ago. And before that, I was in Canberra for a really long time. I was really heavily involved with establishing the cultural burning program in the ACT. Look, there are a lot of brick walls, but I actually see Canberra as being in southern parts of Australia. And I think Dean, who obviously was scheduled to be delivering this, Dean and I have been working together now for many years. And it's great because Dean and I, like I was kind of the more policy process brain, and Dean was the practical cultural authority really from that part of the world, from those mountain areas. He's obviously Wiradjuri, he's not Ngunnawal, but he's from just over the mountain range as well, and that mountain range brings those communities, people together. So actually the ACT's got quite a well-developed cultural burning program implemented throughout various areas throughout the national park and nature reserves. We've actually written a paper on it, so you can look up cultural burning in the Australian Capital Territory. Dean, myself and another colleague, Dr. Jessica, wrote a paper on it. But yeah, yes, there are roadblocks. Yes, with something like the ACT, there is steady momentum, but it is slow. And in many respects, I think slow and steady in this instance is probably a more well-trodden path, a safer path, because it's a constant process of reflection, of learning, and of adaptation. And we also see innovation as we go as well. So we see where the blocks are, and then we kind of open it, try to create those opportunities. And in the area around Gibraltar Peak, next to Tidbinbilla, that's been rezoned now to an Aboriginal fire management zone. It's the first one that exists that I'm aware of. In a way, it's been constructed anywhere in Australia. That is an area of land, a national park, that title or any kind of traditional ownership formally. But you see this gazetting and this rezoning of a certain area for the explicit purposes and explicit management of Aboriginal people from that area, traditional owners using fire to manage that landscape. It's really innovative. So, and we worked for years to get that up. So yes, it's slow, but it is steady, and I think it's making progress. And I think it's the ACT can actually hold their head up really high as being a community that has really supported the traditional, I guess, the caring for country aspirations of work that needs to be done. But there's a lot of opportunities that exist in Canberra that don't exist elsewhere, even just across the border.
Thank you very much, Bhiamie. I think that's more or less covered the question topics that came up. There's been, as I said, lots of lovely comments, which I can cut and paste, I think, because as they're normally, otherwise we lose them. And I'll hand back to Janet now.
Thanks very much, Kirsten, and thanks to everybody for your questions and comments, and Bhiamie for your beautiful answers. And it's really good to hear that the ACT is moving in the right direction on cultural burning and Aboriginal land management, because I think we don't always see that, and whether things are moving in the right direction. And I know personally from efforts in New South Wales as well that it's very slow in New South Wales. So it's good to know that it's happening a bit more here. That's good. So I think it's dinner time. And so I think as we don't have Dean, I'd like to just thank you very much, Bhiamie, for your beautiful presentation. I think it's up to all of us now to work out the best way in which we can walk with you on the journey to try and heal this beautiful country and combat the degradation, the greed, the corruption, the extractive way in which people view and behave towards the environment, and hope that together we can slowly, I'm sure it will be, but gradually help restore the country, give it life, give ourselves life in the process, and make things a lot better for your little fella and your very recent new addition to the family. And hopefully they will grow up with country looking a lot healthier than it does right now. And I know they will be proud of you for your contribution to making it that way, and your inspiration to all of us for getting out there and getting on with it and really raising our voices to support you. So thank you very much. Before I go, I'd like to also thank all the members of Anti-ACT that have helped put this on tonight, to publicise it, to do the arrangements with everybody who was involved. And thanks to everybody who has attended. The lecture is being recorded, and it will be made available on YouTube, and there will be a link to it from the Anti-ACT website in a day or two. So thanks very much to Anti-National for helping us with all of this, We really value that support, and we hope that we are doing Antar proud in this little part of the world in the ACT, and doing our bit for rights and reconciliation. Don't like the word reconciliation. I much prefer rights myself. Rights and responsibilities. And I hope that you can let your friends, families, and others that might be interested know that this lecture will be available to others, and encourage them to watch it, engage with it, and then do what they think they can do in their local area with local elders, local Aboriginal groups, land care groups, whatever. If they can't make immediate contact with local Aboriginal people, do something with an environment group that might, and encourage them to work with the local traditional owners themselves. So thanks very much, Bhiamie. You've really inspired us all, I think. And we hope you have a nice evening. And thank you once more. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks Kirsten for shepherding through the questions as well. And Michael in Antar National for your help. Thanks very much, and good night.